singing this song to you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. So many members of our community here tonight. So good to see so many of you. We appreciate you so much for always. Shayna's here. What? Oh my goodness. So exciting to see so many folks that we haven't seen in a while and who have been just like supporting this project for so long. Like, oh, that just makes me feel really good as we kind of wrap up this year. For those of that you are joining us for the first time, my name is Piper Anderson. I am co-founder and co-director of the Rikers Public Memory Project. And I want to thank you all for joining us this evening for Story by Story, Building a People's History of Rikers Island, a documentary and about the building of the Rikers Public Memory Project. And in a moment, you'll get to hear from the incredible creative team behind this project. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about our work. So the Rikers Public Memory Project was founded in 2018 to collect and make visible the stories of people most impacted by Rikers Island, to mobilize action toward repairing its generational harms, and interrupting the dehumanizing narratives about people harmed by Rikers. We envision a New York City and a society that has chosen a culture of care over punishment. And we work toward that vision through our three core pillars, which is to remember, repair, and redress. And we do that through our oral history collection of over 105 narratives. This is the largest and only public archive documenting a people's history of Rikers, which is now being transferred to the New York Public Library, where it'll be a part of New York City history. In 2021, we brought together members of our community to engage in a co-design process to develop a multimedia exhibit, which we will be piloting through a number of programs throughout 2023. So if you're not on our mailing list, please make sure that you join the mailing list so that you can learn about the events that we're going to be doing throughout the year, introducing components of the exhibit. The goal of the exhibit is to educate people about the legacy and impact of Rikers and to engage New Yorkers in the movement to close Rikers and reinvest in communities most harmed. Lastly, we're developing a reparative justice initiative that will document the public health impacts of Rikers in order to make the case for reinvestment into communities most directly impacted. This work would not be possible, first and foremost, without the trust and participation of our narrators who have trusted us to hold their stories, to facilitate conversations with them about what is undoubtedly one of the most painful experiences that they've ever had. So we want to thank them because this project would not exist without them. We also are really grateful to the amazing community that we have of staff, interns, volunteers, and advisors who give of their time, their creativity, their networks to make this work possible. In the fall, we were able to welcome 2 new staff members, Andrea Nelson and Amelie Lyons, who you are going to hear and see this evening throughout the program. And they have helped to expand our capacity to develop programs and partnerships and continue to strengthen our community engagement initiatives. And lastly, I want to thank our funders, the Mellon Foundation, Trinity Wall Street, and then this documentary that you're going to see tonight was made possible with the support of the International Center for Transitional Justice. So before we move into watching the documentary, I think it's important to acknowledge that 19 lives have been lost at Rikers this year. And I want to invite you all to join me in a moment of silence to honor those that we've lost. Thank you, everyone. So, as we know, Rikers is not closed yet, but we are committed to using everything at our disposal to support the movement to close Rikers as soon as possible so that we do not continue to lose our brothers and sisters who should not be in a place like Rikers at all. And I think that as you watch this documentary, you will understand fully what Rikers truly is and what it represents to so many, and why remembering it in order to shutter it, in order to reclaim through our collective memory the truth of Rikers and the truth of the communities and families that have survived it and those who haven't through this work. So I'm going to pass it now to Regina and Leo, who will introduce the film. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome again to our year-end celebration and documentary screening. We are both excited and grateful that you are here with us tonight. For at least 2 years now, we have discussed wanting to document the history of the Rikers Public Memory Project. It was never the right time or had the right people or the funding. But back in May, everything aligned thanks to a generous grant from the International Center for Transitional Justice, who I believe is here with us tonight, and the onboarding of Leo Valdez from the Rutgers Graduate Public Humanities Internship. Leo is a doctoral student from the Department of History at Rutgers Brunswick, with a focus on merging carceral state history with trans studies. We have worked together for the last 6 months, bringing this documentary together. This 30-minute film, story by story, building a people's history of Rikers Island, will take us from a movement to close a jail complex to a movement to reclaim the narrative of Rikers Island for the communities that have survived it. This film will be a part of our PMP's multimedia resource toolkit that can help communities think through similar processes. You will learn about Rikers Island, the 3 movements that gave rise to the Rikers Public Memory Project, why this work is important, summaries of replicable tools and lessons learned, and where we go from here. We refer to this documentary as an oral history of our oral history project. And as Piper mentioned, this documentary would not have been possible without our narrators, leaders, interns, volunteers, and funders. And so now I turn it over to Leo, the phenomenal co-director, editor, narrator of this documentary, who has been extremely gracious and patient with me over the last 6 months as we've worked to bring this to you today.
Thank you, Regina. Right back at you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Leo Valdez. I am a graduate student at Rutgers University, and for the past 6 months have been working as an intern with the Rikers Public Memory Project to create what has become Story by Story, building a people's history of Rikers Island. This documentary began as all things begin at the Rikers Public Memory Project, with the voices of those at the center. I remember my first meeting with my amazing, brilliant, and encouraging supervisor, the producer and co-director, Regina. I assumed that I was brought on to transcribe oral histories or maybe do some research. But during our first meeting, Regina said to me, "We want you to do oral histories with us and make a documentary about the Oral History Project." And I said, "Okay, cool, let's do it." For the next 6 months, we set our minds to making this documentary, laying the path brick by brick, not knowing exactly what the final video would look like, but always keeping our eyes on the horizon, much like the movement to close Rikers, to which this documentary proudly belongs. I learned a lot through this experience, but perhaps the most surprising has been discovering a new way to use oral histories. This documentary developed primarily via 10 oral histories conducted over Zoom, ranging from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. They are the heart and soul of the documentary. Every narrator featured has their own way of seeing the issue of mass incarceration and the issue that is Rikers Island itself. They each bring their own unique interpretation and lived experience, and together form a rich chorus of voices. Merging the art of documentary filmmaking and oral histories has been eye-opening for me. It has provided a new medium for sharing the knowledge that oral histories generate and a new method for creating historical narratives that are grounded in the experiences and analyses of people at the center of these issues. So without further ado, we present Story by Story, Building a People's History of Rikers Island.
Thing that I'll remember most about Rikers is that it has definitely taken a lot of lives, both physically, emotionally, right? People, there's different ways to die, and you learn that when you're on Rikers.
Rikers, Rikers has a history that goes way back to slavery, and this is what we see today is the ramifications of that. It is the evolution of slavery, and we gotta call things for what they are. We gotta call things for what they are. It is no secret that most of the folks you're gonna see at Rikers detained are coming from the same communities.
We, especially people of color, tell our histories at the kitchen table, right? And so in barbershops and on street corners and at people's homes and in these neighborhoods, the history is very much alive. And that's why it's so great that we have made the whole Rikers Public Memory Project accountable to people who are directly impacted. And so we can make sure to always acknowledge and affirm the fact that people have been telling their stories, and now we want them to be a part of public record. And I feel like that's what the Rikers Public Memory Project is really doing.
This is why the project is important for just the average Joe person, because guess what? Somebody you love may be incarcerated one day, or you. And besides that, it just is like widen your base. Why wouldn't you give a shit? There's a jail in your borough. Maybe you should know what goes on. There's a whole jail in your borough, like maybe in your neighborhood. Maybe you should know what's going on with the people who go in and out of there. Why not know?
Rikers Island is the world's largest penal colony with 413 acres that can accommodate up to 15,000 people and an annual budget of $160 million. And it's the last historical penal colony in the United States. But interesting enough, it's not a prison. It's a series of jails. And the history of Rikers has never been published or been a part of the public record, even though it's central to New York City's history. But it does exist in the collective memories of those who have endured the trauma of Rikers. And it's that memory that the Rikers Public Memory Project seeks to activate.
The Rikers Public Memory Project collects and makes visible the stories of people most impacted by Rikers Island to mobilize action toward repairing its generational harms and interrupting the dehumanizing narratives about people harmed by Rikers.
3 organizations, Freedom Agenda, Create Forward, and Humanities Action Lab, decided to come together to form this partnership under the umbrella of the Rikers Public Memory Project. And everything that we are doing centers around closing Rikers Island jails and reinvesting in directly impacted communities.
So Mass Story Lab was an opportunity to, combine some of, what I learned about like restorative justice and transformative justice with storytelling work to bring people together, around centering story to imagine other possibilities for justice. So we did that project for 3 years. We traveled to 13 cities and worked with lots of different community groups across the country. And that project really became the forerunner of what is now the Rikers Public Memory Project.
So States of Incarceration emerged kind of from the Guantanamo Project as a similar mode. It was a sort of collective reckoning with the history of mass incarceration that invited university students and others directly impacted by incarceration in 20 different cities or 20 different communities to dig into the roots of incarceration in their particular locality. And we had just decided that the New York team was going to focus on Rikers as their kind of like local story.
The Close Rikers campaign was launched in April 2016. It was launched at a moment where the torture and of Kalief Browder on Rikers Island had become public knowledge, and there was at that time media attention around that, and the federal government had just joined a lawsuit against New York City because of the conditions on Rikers Island, and particularly the high rates of use of force by correction officers. The campaign leaders felt like it was a time to really focus organizing energy on actually achieving closure. I think of the Rikers Public Memory Project as this really important parallel component to the campaign to close Rikers, which is to ensure that we're really able to hold enough space for the narrative shift and the long view conversation about how to address the harms of Rikers.
Following Kalief's death, the Independent Commission on New York City Criminal Justice and Incarceration undertook a year-long study on the conditions on Rikers Island and released a report calling for its closure.
The next time that we connected about this idea was when the Lippman Commission submitted its report that in addition to closing Rikers, they also recommended sort of a like museum or memorial, or, they had sort of memory as like articulated as an essential part of closing.
Rikers Island is a stain on our great city. It leaves its mark on everyone it touches.
When he first got arrested, I was in total shock. Then I was in total grief. Then I was in total loss of knowing what to do. So years kept going by. And then one day I woke up and I said, what's going on? This is already 5 years. And I am just crying still. I can't be crying anymore. This is 5 years. Now I'm getting angry. I was so angry and so upset. And I started Googling organizations online that I could reach out, and I called every organization that I would find in phone numbers or emailing, searching that I need to do something, but I cannot do it alone.
You can't really lead a grassroots campaign to close Rikers without questioning the whole premise of Rikers. Like people who've been incarcerated on Rikers demonstrating clearly their leadership and their potential and their value as New Yorkers and like contributors to our city, like that, I deeply believe that itself impacts the narrative that people have about incarceration and about Rikers Island. But the Rikers Public Memory Project, I think, is a space to dig in more on that and figure out ways that reaches a larger audience and maybe reaches people in other ways.
At every single phase of this project, we have turned towards the individuals who have, faced Rikers firsthand and asked them, what should this project look like? You know, what will really make the difference?
The three, components of the project, the oral history, the mobile exhibit, and the public health initiative, those three specific areas of the project came out of, this year-long fact-finding from different communities. We were in different communities and people talking about how they want Rikers remembered in the way they want it remembered. So, just from the inception of the project, it was driven by people directly impacted.
The challenge with, doing this kind of work, this work around cultural change, is that it isn't always so tangible or measurable all the time. I think what we have been successful at doing is creating a approach to storytelling, to public memory work that centers those who have been most directly impacted, that is very sort of, consultative on a level that most projects aren't.
To date, the Rikers Public Memory Project has collected over 100 oral histories. This is the largest collection of oral histories about Rikers Island in existence. These oral histories have been donated to the New York Public Library to ensure their long-term preservation. Why is it so important to share, hear, and remember stories about Rikers Island?
Stories are adaptive and they shape our behavior. The narratives that we tell over and over again become our realities.
As a scholar, I've kind of looked at like, oh, that's a sort of theoretical framework to think about this place. Like, there's also these really fantastic kind of contexts that you get from it too, and language that I think we get to understand the impact of Rikers that I don't think a psychologist, sociologist, historian, anyone who hasn't been in there can figure out. And so that's the other thing, is that if we're going to actually really document and look at the harm done, those oral histories also tell us how to understand it.
I am so many things. And I was so many things prior to this experience. I'm not saying this one experience changed my whole life. I'm a culmination of all my life experiences, right? But this having been probably the most negative one in my life, and that I came out winning, is choice. I really believe that people need to know that they are valid and important, and their stories are important, and that their stories can really help change the trajectory of someone else's life.
The power of storytelling is also as a mobilizing tool, it's incredibly painful for the storytellers, and it's incredibly re-traumatizing, and it's a real sacrifice that everybody is making to go through that again and to share their stories.
I think it's really different than other organizations I've worked for. When I worked at the Museum Historic Site, where I was at for about 9 years in Philadelphia, it was primarily targeted towards white, middle-class, tourist audience engaging with issues of criminal justice and mass incarceration, potentially for the first time, ever on a deep level. So it's really different to work for a project like the Rikers Project that is really centering people who have been traumatized by Rikers and operating as a sort of community truth and reconciliation organization.
My first participation in the project was as a volunteer transcriber. I started around the end of summer 2020, and I was participating in meetings with other volunteers where we would come together and spend 1 or 2 hours together to transcribe everyone together in silence, of course, in our headphones. Those meetings were fantastic, especially since listening to the recordings can be, challenging, emotionally challenging. And so by being together even in that virtual space, we were able every now and then to stop, take a pause, chat a bit, reflect together on what we heard, or maybe even take a moment to recenter ourselves in order to be able to continue doing the work of transcribing.
Because our project has primarily been like grassroots, partner funded, it requires a lot of volunteers. Fundamental to all of that is making sure that we have this ecosystem of care and using like trauma-informed approaches with everyone that has like a touch point on the project.
Just seeing how Rikers Public Memory Project works as an organization and the care that they have for each other, and the care that's been bestowed upon me and I've been able to give to others, like it's really what I think we need as a community to grow and change these structures and institutions. Yeah, it just kind of just shines a light on how the government doesn't take care of us, we take care of us. And seeing that like firsthand through this project has been really beautiful for me.
Since I left the island in August 2003, I've been an organizer and advocate for everything against the prison mill industrial complex, and anything against mass incarceration, specifically Rikers Island, because that's where I did my time. So someone knew about the project and invited me, and I was interviewed by Tamika Graham. You kind of relive, depending on the question, you kind of relive the experience there at the experience of incarceration. So it's challenging. I believe I cried in my interview.
Initially, when we were talking about we were going to collect these oral stories, the idea was that we were going to archive them and gift them to the New York Public Library. And then the pandemic hit, and then the libraries all shut down. So there was no movement for almost, over a year. So we had to ask ourselves, are we going to just wait until the library is ready for us? We don't know when that's going to be. Because of that closed door, that momentarily closed door, it created all of this other innovation, right? So we had to rethink how we were going to share our stories.
It's hard because when you do finally get out, okay, if there's not places like this where I'm at now, where there's so much help, you're literally in the street, So you go in the street and it's a revolving door. I'll be back in Rikers Island in 90 days stops.
It is, if you go to certain neighborhoods in New York City, neighborhoods that have sort of, been forced to serve as like feeder neighborhoods for Rikers, you see the way that human capital is extracted from these communities and put on to, this island that has been called Torture Island. And all of those people come back home, and with them, when they return home, they bring the trauma of that experience with them. And if there's one person in your neighborhood, in your family, in your community that is experiencing trauma, the people around them are going to feel the consequences of that as well. It has a ripple effect, right? Trauma doesn't just affect one person, it affects everyone around you.
My son is out of Rikers Island. He's home. He was never given a trial. They never received the trial, because after all the trauma that he underwent in Rikers Island, he decided that he was so scared. And they kind of do it on purpose as a tactic. They wear you down, you stay there for 6 years, you get abused, you get so vulnerable and so fragile that at the end you accept a plea deal. And that's what they wanted to give him, a plea deal. And he accepted it because he told me, I'm so worn out, I'm so weak, I cannot face a trial at this point, 6 years later.
That's C95 for you. That's the worst intake in Rikers Island. And you can't make a phone call. Your people are trying to call the jail, and they're trying to derail them from them knowing you're in the pens for 6 days. Like this, it's the most inhumane cruelty. It's torture chambers are in C95. Those are torture chambers. They're very dark, desolate, dirty. You can't see any light, minimal light. Most unsanitary conditions. Piss, shit, milk, food all over. You know.
I didn't want my family coming to see me when I was on the island because, you know, that whole visitation process. I was visiting people who were on Rikers Island. You know what I mean? I knew people who were locked up there before I got locked up, and I would visit. And you know, that whole process is just so degrading. You feel like a criminal yourself. You know what I mean?
The more I dug, the more stuff there was. Then we find this New York Times article that's like, to build a bigger jail, and it's from the 19th century. So it's like, oh, there was an intention there to build this humongous facility to literally disappear unwanted New Yorkers. Then I discovered these government reports from the beginning of Rikers that said, this place is not healthy for human beings to live. The thing that kind of started to happen is I realized that what we talk about in terms of the conditions at Rikers now also existed when it first began. If I were to show you all of these sort of different reports of incidents there and cover the dates up, you would not be able to tell the difference. Like, I stopped being able to tell the difference between like 1950 and 1990. It was really alarming to sort of see that there is this consistency there. So I think that the most important part of the history is that like this place is the way it is on purpose. It was designed that way. It was not designed for human beings to live in at all.
I saw a op-ed by I think it was Neil Barsky of the Marshall Project. It was making this analogy between Rikers and Guantanamo, and it was saying like we have to close Rikers the way we campaigned to close Guantanamo.
The Rikers Island complex is New York's Guantanamo Bay, a secluded island beyond the gaze of watchdogs where the Constitution is no guide. It is a place that has outlived its usefulness.
The fact that he had to get his readers' attention on Rikers by comparing it to Guantanamo kind of blew my mind, because I was like, Guantanamo is this like tiny US military outpost in the remote part of Cuba that like nobody can go visit. But the campaign around it has made it somehow more visible and more recognizable as a sort of place of incarceration and a symbol of the abrogation of like human rights than this jail that is our city's jail that's right here.
I think the type of organizing that the Rikers Public Memory Project sits most fully in is around narrative shift. And that is when you're also working on legislative organizing and you're trying to like pass specific proposals or work on the timeline of the state legislative calendar or the city legislative calendar. It's sometimes really hard to carve out enough space to work on the really enduring narrative shift that makes legislative wins able to stand and not be, sort of threatened or eroded later.
Prisons and punishment and criminal justice are so sort of central to the American story. And yet, I think a lot of people are still pretty in the dark about how the criminal legal system works, who gets caught up in that system, who generally has the privilege of avoiding that system.
You could close Rikers and still have most people or a lot of people operating from a very wrong story about what Rikers was, even if it doesn't exist. And I think that even like the incorrect memory of that is harmful to the chances of our change, the changes that we want enduring.
But I think fighting against the prevailing public narrative has been difficult. Really, really difficult. And so there's such this sensational idea that Rikers is where, like, I call it like the place where supervillains go.
Strikers Island Penitentiary, first appeared in Superman Volume 2, Number 9 in 1987. Far from being supervillains, in reality, 84% of the jail population in New York City consists of people in pretrial detention, innocent until proven guilty. People detained at Rikers help each other survive, and many become organizers and leaders in the fight to change the system.
I would not have survived jail had it not been for the camaraderie of the women who I was incarcerated with. You know, when you don't have things and you don't have commissary yet to buy the things you need, I'm talking about sanitary products, things like that, food, because the food is disgusting. They will look out for you without asking anything in return. Like, you know, just, you felt like I couldn't believe that people showed kindness to each other. When we were in our worst, we were at our low in our life, you know what I mean? But that to me was really quite amazing.
When you look at the history of prison organizing in this country, which dates back to the 1950s, 1960s, what you see is that the leadership and the strategy and the impetus for so much of the organizing has come from inside, right? That people have for a very long time been organizing and mobilizing, and we have to always take our leadership for them because they understand firsthand what this system is and what it was created to do.
I think Rikers should be remembered for exactly what it is. It should be remembered as an institution of oppression. It should be remembered as a symbol of racism. It should be looked at as a sign of archaic laws and policies that just need to be revamped and done away with. Because even though we scream close Rikers and we want Rikers to close now, that's not a quick answer. Close Rikers is not a statement, it's a conversation that needs to be had.
I think it's really integral and fundamental to our democracy that we have conversations around the role of prisons and jails, who is incarcerated, who is not incarcerated. And I think that projects like the Rikers Project have a role to play in actually, pushing policy changes and activating enough public interest to actually kind of shift not only the narrative about who is criminalized and the consequences of that criminalization, but also policy and kind of general sentiment around what we do with people who break the law and what are our laws for and are they fair and just, and all these other questions that we can activate through dialogue and through projects like the Rikers Project.
In the next goal, we hope that we can really make the case for reparative justice, right? To repair the harm of Rikers once it's closed, as it's closing.
Unfortunately, the damage to us, to my son, to our family is already done. And it's there. It's not gonna go away. It's done, it's part of our life now, it's part of our experience. But I speak and I keep talking about Rikers because I don't want this to happen to other people, but it's still going on, it's still happening. People are dying on Rikers Island as we speak today.
Storytelling allows us to go deeper with our hearts and minds, which creates space to transform and to be transformed.
You shut the island down and then what? You're gonna forget about it? I don't think so. It needs to be remembered.
To highlight the impact of incarceration and what that means for all of us, because we have similarities, but we have differences. It's really an honor.
All right. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did, and there was plenty of I think recognition felt in there at the end for the narrators, but I'll just reiterate it how incredible it has been for everyone to contribute to this project overall and to specifically this documentary. I'm Sarita. I'm a co-director of Freedom Agenda, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am just joining in here to give a quick update about what's happening on Rikers Now and the campaign to close Rikers, and ask for folks to take some quick action in support. So the plan to close Rikers is a legally binding commitment for the city to close all the jails on Rikers by 2027. But we have two challenges right now. One is a mayor who is resistant to that requirement, and has not formally said that he will not comply with the law, but is pursuing policies that really threaten that implementation, most especially reducing the number of people in the jails. His policies are instead pushing us in the other direction, and closing Rikers has always been about reducing the number of people exposed to incarceration in New York City, while also changing the conditions for people who are incarcerated. So we knew that this is a part of the reason that Rikers is not already closed is that it's a monumental task. It's always been a project that would have to probably cut across multiple mayoral administrations, and sustaining that commitment and Freedom Agenda with our members and our partners. We are committed to doing that, and we feel capable of doing that. And yet a lot of work remains to be done. So that is one thing that we're facing. The other is that even if we had a mayor who was fully on board with the closure of Rikers and committed to getting us there in all the best ways that they could by 2027, and gradually reducing the jail population to get there, the conditions on Rikers right now are horrific, and they are killing people at a horrific rate. And Piper spoke to that at the beginning of our event, but 19 people have died in the city jails this year alone. That exceeds what was already the astounding death rate of 16 people last year. And these conditions cannot continue for 5 more years. We cannot lose 100 more people on Rikers Island in that time. And so the urgency is not just to make sure that we're on track with the plan to close Rikers, but that we're in fact accelerating it, especially accelerating the commitment to reducing incarceration and getting people out, getting people the treatment that they need, the support that they need, and getting people out, because it's never been a safe place for people to be. And now it's not even a place where people can count on coming out alive. So we need everyone in every possible way to send a message to the mayor that it is unacceptable to be backing away from this commitment to close Rikers. And recently, his commissioner of corrections projected that the jail population will probably increase in the coming year, and specifically said that if nothing changes, the number of people in New York City's jail system will increase. And our response to that would be nothing changing is absolutely unacceptable. The mayor has the power to make investments in mental health treatment, to make investments that can, Anna spoke to the horrific case delays that Gyro experienced, and that's continuing today. The mayor can make investments to address that. I don't need to go through all of the things that he can do to exercise his power differently, including the way that he speaks about safety and the way that he speaks about people who are incarcerated. But he needs to hear that the vision he's put forth is not the vision that New Yorkers will accept, of one in which we either throw our hands up and say, oh, the number of people in jails it's just going to rise, or even potentially make it worse. So I believe that Amelie is going to put our petition link in the chat. And what we have is a quick way for people to take action. You click on this link and it will tell you there are 2 steps to it for a good reason. The only sure way we have of getting our messages to the mayor is through the online form that the city uses, but we also want to know how many people took action. So we're asking you to just go to our site, copy the text, put it into this web form to contact the mayor, and then come back to our site just to let us know that you submitted. There's a lot more to do, and hope that you'll stay engaged with the campaign as well as the Rikers Public Memory Project. You can follow us on Instagram or any other platforms as Freedom Agenda NY, if you want to be continuously updated on what further opportunities there are to take action. So we thank you for joining today and for taking this additional step today, to make sure that we're moving towards this different reality for our city that we all want.
Thank you, Sarita. And I want to thank Regina and Leo for the incredible work that you all did the last 6 months to create this, important document of the work. So thank you so much for all of your hard work and your sweat and your tears to make that happen, and sifting through tons of feedback. So we want to just take a moment to hear from you all and get your reactions to what you just saw. And so we're just going to take a couple of minutes, just like 2 or 3 minutes, to put up a little Slido here. And the way that Slido works, if you're not familiar, is you can use this QR code on the left here, or go to slido.com and put in the code 7582582. And we'll be able to see your reactions in real time. So go ahead and share your thoughts.
And as they come on the screen, I'm just gonna read them out. Breathtaking, narrators are brilliant. I agree. Powerful. Eye-opening and sad. Heartfelt. Very well documented. Extremely compelling.
Awesome. Which is in interest of time, we're going to move on to the next one. Breathtaking. Yes, love that. You can keep them coming. We'll continue to, we'll be able to see these afterwards, but in the interest of time, I want to make sure we get at least one more question in. Beautiful storytelling, lovely. So next question, Leo, you want to read the question here?
Sure. So there are a chorus of voices reflecting diverse perspectives and practices addressing the impacts of mass incarceration and its harm. Moving forward, what voices, facts, or approaches should be included in our work? People who experienced incarceration, definitely.
Always.
Neighbors and community members. Thank you.
Nice.
Opportunities for advocacy from any retired corrections officers that would tell the truth. Mental health professionals, powerful testimony of historic people who were incarcerated to see the commonalities. That's a great idea. repeat over and over that Rikers is pre-trial. I can say that that fact it reshaped the way I have been studying mass incarceration and jail crisis. That fact that it is pre-trial is so important, so important. To be sure not to exclude Black women, definitely. Medical staff, trauma-informed care practitioners, children of incarcerated parents, people who were there and experienced the trauma. And legal scholars and attorneys. Can't see the rest. Disabled people, trans people, and gender nonconforming people. Anyone impacted by Rikers. Those formerly incarcerated people who are now experiencing homelessness because of incarceration. The siblings of those incarcerated, and putting oral histories accessible online.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Okay, keep them coming in. We would love to continue to receive your feedback. And to close us out, I'm going to pass it on to Regina.
So we are endlessly thankful to all who have provided their interviews, feedback, technical support throughout the creation of this documentary. We're also deeply grateful for your support and the support we receive from the advisors, donors, interns, and volunteers who generously continue to offer their time, talent, and financial support to the Rikers Public Memory Project. This project would not be possible without the bravery and vulnerability shared by the directly impacted narrators who contribute their stories and vision in the face and beyond Rikers Island. And as we look towards 2023, we need your support in shifting narratives and mobilizing action to support the communities most impacted by Rikers. Sarita shared some ways that you can support the Close Rikers campaign, but with the Rikers Public Memory Project, your donation enable us to organize more oral history collection events and archive and preserve the narratives. Your support helps with the production of the multimedia exhibition that Piper mentioned at the beginning of our time together. This exhibition will encourage visitors to engage in remembering those who lost because of the history of Rikers human rights abuses, and to demand justice for impacted communities. And it will allow us to bring together directly impacted advisors, artists, and designers to host public programming in 2023. So right now, if you're following our social media, you may have seen that we are calling and seeking to collaborate with a team of artists and designers to create our mobile exhibit. We have a variety of roles: digital interactive designer, textile artist, audio experience designers, illustrators. So there's a number of opportunities, paid opportunities for participating in the project in that way. We're also super excited that we will be resuming in-person oral history collection events come January. So we have our first in-person oral history collection event with the Women's Community Justice Association. That's the amazing team behind the Beyond Rosie's campaign, and that will be on Thursday, January 12th. And in preparation for that, we have a volunteer training on January 9th that will be via Zoom and with our wonderful historian, Shana Alexander. I want to thank you again for joining us. Right now, our program is officially over, and we are trying to be very respectful of everyone's time, but we will keep our Zoom open for casual questions and conversations for a few more minutes. So anybody that needs to leave, we thank you again and good night. And those that have some time to chat, or if you have any questions, We have a number of narrators that have joined us tonight. Pilar, Marian, Anna, as well as a number of our volunteers. So if anybody has any questions for them or for any of the leadership team, we can stay around to do that for a little bit.
Hi, can I ask a first question?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Sydney. I had posted in the chat. I'm a writer and a journalist. I'm working on a book at the moment about the history of the ballroom community in New York City. So if you're familiar with voguing and so on, that is the world that I'm writing about. And it definitely overlaps with Rikers for a number of reasons. Number one, there are stories of people voguing in Rikers in the late 70s. And I was curious if your project looked at any stories of gay, particularly gay, bisexual, cisgendered men and or transgendered people at Rikers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I would love to connect with your team if you all have any research or can point me in the right direction for information about this time period. And then, of course, more recently, Laylene Extravaganza, who was one of my sisters, I'm in the House of Extravaganza. She obviously was killed at Rikers, which was a very large case that happened recently. And while I'm in touch with some of the activists who were organizing around it, who got the big settlement from the city, I would also like to be in touch with you all for any other information that you all might have on that. So if there's a way to get in touch with folks, I don't know, maybe if somebody could DM me or if any of your information is public, I would love to be able to access that.
Yes, Andrea, if you could please, you can put my contact information in the chat. And Sydney, I would love to have further conversations with you regarding some of the oral histories that we've collected so far. One of the things that we have recognized is that we are missing voices in this collection. So towards the end of 2021, we were very intentional of reaching out to people that who English was not their first language. They were part of the LGBTQ community or identified with having a disability. And so we had targeted outreach throughout 2021, and we plan on continuing to do that in 2023. So I would love to talk to you more about that.
Great, thank you. And this was an incredible presentation and incredible work as well. So thank you everybody for sharing. I appreciated it.
Yes, the documentary will be available to the public. It will be on our YouTube page, as well as we intend on having a live screening in New York City sometime in the spring. And then the larger collection. So as Leo mentioned, we had, over 10 hours of interview content that we brought down to 30 minutes, but we will be using clips from the oral history interviews for and making them available to the public. So, and Marianne, I think I saw your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to say, can y'all hear me? I'm at another meeting, but I could not get on this meeting. And thank you so much, Mom, for getting on. Oh my God, I'm such a cry. I feel like crying again. What an emotional evening. So just, remembering 3 years ago, whatever, when I was sitting in my front yard being interviewed, and then the culmination, being involved with all of the conversations, every conversation. Y'all are so inviting and so encouraging and so kind that it was like imperative for me to tell my story, to put my face on the screen, to give you my name and come out of hiding that this happened to me and it's okay.
Thank you, Marianne. You have just been such a blessing as an advisor, as a narrator, as a thought partner, and we are just so blessed to have you working with us and to be able to be in service. So thank you.
Thank you all, and to all of y'all who shared, everyone else who shared their experiences. This is just really quite overwhelming, and I'm sure for my mom too, to be able to know things that I would never tell. She would never know because I told her. So this is so important for family members of people who have been on Rikers. We won't talk about it. So thank you all again so much for tonight. It's been very impactful.
I just want to say thank you to Marian as well. It's really nice seeing you here tonight, and thank you for sharing. It was an honor to talk to you and to do an oral history with you.
Leo, ditto. You said that earlier, ditto. I love you all, but I have to go. Thanks, Mom.
Anna, not to put you on the spot, but if you have any remarks or would like to share, I would love to have you take the space.
Thank you, Regina. Yeah, I was very impressed by the film. It was very well put together. I like the way it was very well done. I like the narrative. I like to hear the different voices, not just the videos, but also the vocals behind. I could tell there were different people speaking, which was very nice. Yeah, it was very powerful. And you did use a lot of my footage, which I was surprised. It was really good. I liked that it was diverse. It was visual, vocal, verbal, and writing, written. It was very well done. And Leo, you were very good. Thank you so much, all of you. But I had like a real closer relation with Leo during this, and it was very, very nice working with you. Yeah, I would like to watch it again and again. I wish I could just have the link and watch it again, because I know that I have to catch more and more. I want to get into all the details. Thank you very much, all of you.
Most definitely. So it will go on our YouTube page, I think by Friday, and we'll make sure that we send it out to everyone to be able to share, to watch. And it does, you're right on, it does take a couple times to watch it, to really absorb all of the voices and what it was that we were hearing. And then Liz and see, we still have a few other narrators that are still with us. So I want to give you an opportunity if you wanted to say anything before we close.
I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. I decided not to watch it before tonight. I really wanted to have the experience of watching it with everybody, and it was incredible. And I learned so much from the narrators. As always, I had heard them speak, and even these specific testimonies and sort of analyses before, but every time it just I just learned so much from their experience and wisdom. So I just really appreciate it. And you guys are awesome, and I love working with you. So congrats.
All right, if there's no other questions or remarks, we will end our evening, our end of the year celebration. Again, thanking everyone. I want to thank our tech, and it's so amazing to have new staff members. So Emily and Andrea, thank you so much for your behind the scenes work and making this happen. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Good night, everyone.
And bye. Bye.